Ready? Thanks for the introduction, Joe. So if everybody's set, let's go. Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Freek de Man because that's not pronounceable in English. People call me Freek, which is unfortunate. My current position is an IT manager security officer at Orange Valley, and I volunteer as a privacy speaker doing guest lectures at middle schools and high schools about privacy, the use of WhatsApp, ethics, and I divide my time between that and system architect for foundations and NGOs who have to deal with a lot of privacy issues which relate to the GDPR issues in Europe. If you would like to talk to me or hit me up after this small keynote, you can hit me up on Twitter, Signal, Ricochet, or Keybase. And you can find me there by my given name. I don't have an alias. So that's me introduced. Where I live, it's a tiny country in Europe. It's the Netherlands. So if I screw up my English, please forgive me. It's not my native language, and I try to do my best. So if you would be so kind as to forgive me for any errors I make. Why we are in lockdown in the Netherlands? Well, there's a big fest every year. This year it was in March. It has a Catholic origin where everybody goes out in the street and goes out drinking. And we had some of the first corona patients there. So unfortunately, that is why the Netherlands is in lockdown right now. Coming back to my topic, building a role-based access system on a Google Cloud platform. It was my employer who had a couple of problems, and I thought this was the easiest fix for it. And also because I'm not a very good sysadmin, this is easier for me. It avoids doing menial chores or doing the same chore 2 or 3 times a day. Quick summary, what is the problem? What is the situation? Where do we log what? What is the situation now? And what we would want. So the problem my employer had is we had old software as a service solutions for the business. We had a business need for data integrations. We had no way to easily check the logs when I started working there. IT was outsourced, service and maintenance as well. Orange Valley is a consultancy company doing internet marketing. It has about 120 employees. It's a Google partner, and the easiest way to describe them is hired guns. You hire people on an hourly rate. So that as the outset is the problem that I faced. So here we see the network that was there when I got there. On the left-hand side, you see the ISP side, firewall, which used to be Sophos. And then we have the Orange Valley internal network, switches, a couple of routers, and some access points, and a file server, which you see in the middle. The file server was where all of the data of our clients and all of our data of our employees was stored. It didn't have a backup. It didn't have a redundancy backup. If we screwed up the file server, all data was lost. And inside the network were a couple of printers, some laptops, and a couple of standalone PCs. So that was the situation that I encountered and I had to fix. So it was time for coffee and a think. Now, for me, I'm an IT guy for about 15 years, and I'm not a very diligent administrator. So I wanted to make a system that would automate the most of the tasks that I would previously had done by hand. So I worked around the network for a bit. changed out the firewall for an open sense firewall, one that I could configure and maintain. The network on the inside would be the same, but the authorization of all employees would, as of now, go through the Google single sign-on application. And it wasn't a big step because we were using Gmail as a company. So that was a small sacrifice to make, and it took about a couple of weeks to implement it. And from then on, I had the advantage of having logs from Google where I could see who accessed what and when. And that's a plus in my book. So we have an hour registration system where employees log their hours. We have a CRM tool where new jobs are being input. We have an HR tool which logs holidays and days off and stuff like that. And we have a file server. We used Google Drive to replace the file server. And all the diagram lines go to the cloud because Google Drive is a cloud-based application. It's basically someone else's computer that we're leasing. So it works, but it's a flat tool and you have to make some adjustments to make it work. All these systems, our registration system, CRM tool, and the HR tool are software as a service. So they all have APIs, which we can access through Google Drive, or we can write a cron script that will query the data from the HR tool and CRM tool and sync it to Google Drive. Those cron scripts are on the Google Cloud Platform. So this is where we are now. This is basically how our operation is running. The cloud services are all on the Google Cloud Platform. Consultants can work from home or from another office. And the second thing I implemented was multi-factor authorization because otherwise brute forcing a password just for a mail account is too easy. It's too cheap and you can't make a password that can't be brute forced anymore. So that's why I used multi-factor authorization. I'll be coming back to that later. This is a diagram of the situation now, and it walks you through the authorization process and the way we collect data from our software as a service tools and use the Google platform, the Google Cloud Platform, to sync those jobs into our environment. The multi-factor authorization. I had to make that compulsory because of brute forcing. And all our employees have a company provided mobile phone. So it was fairly easy to either use Google Authenticator or use the login prompt. And we have a couple of older employees and they still use MFA through text. I know it's not secure, but it's a risk that's acceptable to management. So that's why we still use it. How does it look? I blacked out some of the files. It looks like this if you log in as a consultant. So basically, somebody plans your jobs. You get hours for a certain client. And when you get hours for a certain client, you get access to the information. That script runs 24 times a day, not really on the hour, but near the hour. So whenever you have a new client, your team drive will be updated within the hour. Once every day, we remove the people who have fulfilled their hours on the client, so they get removed automatically. There's no more menial chores for me to do. Otherwise, then every once in a while, check the logs and see if everything's still going according to plan. How does this logging work? Well, if you're familiar with G Suite, and I really took a lot of notes yesterday, the last speaker who was a fraud expert, G Suite has the option to log a lot. It logs basically everything that you do and everything that you access once you've logged into your corporate Gmail account. It has no persistent access on our employees' devices. So we could even try and institute a bring your own device policy, but I'm not really in favor for it right now. But this creates kind of like a virtual shell where you can access all the logs of everything that is being done, every mail that is being sent, every G-chat that's being had, every hangout that's being had. And with this comes a lot of responsibility, because I don't want to build a virtual prison. So I'm not gonna relinquish control over this data. This is only being used in cases of an emergency, or if there's a reasonable expectation of misbehavior. I'm not going to dig through someone's mail, nor am I going to check someone's chats. That's not ethical. I won't do it, and I won't be a part of an organization that will. Luckily for me, my employer is not that keen on accessing someone's mail. So the team drives, they all have a basic file extension, just like you use it, just like with Windows. The only thing that's different here, and that you have to take into account if you're moving your entire organization to team drives, is that you can only give access to the top level account. So once you give access to a folder, the parent gives it access to all underlying folders. And that's something that you have to take into account, and maybe change the way you use directories or folders. Because it's a nifty tool, and once it's set up, it works like a charm, but it has some restrictions to it. So for me, this is my page, and this is the page you can see as an admin. It has the normal info. It also has which kind of groups you belong to. You can check if people have 2FA. You can see what kind of applications they have connected to their Gmail. So it's a really useful tool, and give you a lot of information, a lot of control, and a lot of security control as well, which was my main focus for building this, because I started out as a hacker and still have a hacker mindset, and I still look for the stuff you can break. And this, the way Google Suite is set up, and the way it gives the admin control, gives you a lot of things that you can either restrict or well, at least log. So it gives a lot of control to the admin. I try to make all our employees as security aware as possible. It's usually like a 10-minute talk and a presentation if new people come to join our company. And normally I do a little OSINT search. So the trick is they walk in, usually a group of 5 or more, and I start to present the stuff I found about them. And that immediately makes them security aware. oh, I'm sharing a lot online. I used to post this on Instagram. But with a normal set of employees, I can find out where they live, their address, if they have pets, if what their home situation is. So when you walk in, I try to make you security as aware as possible as an employee, and I also am completely transparent in what we can see, what you do on your computer. So it's a work computer, it's a work phone. I try to be as transparent as possible about that. We have three pillars that uh, I also, share with the employees. We have information. I have logs for audits. I have control over IT inventory. Data stored at Google. We use Google Vault for chats and all the other log stuff that you as a user might want to delete. And as storage is concerned, the backup solution is still in place. I have a redundant backup, but to be honest, I don't think it's very useful to try and beat Google in having backups, because their data centers are amazing, and I've never had any issues with anything, and I can't imagine me coming up with a better solution than Google has at the moment. I always implore our employees, if you see something, say something, because I can't secure our office alone. Um, it's fairly easy. Security is impossible to do by yourself, and together we can make things better. So that's the angle I always use. And of course, I realize that all things can be broken. Um, it doesn't matter how many security controls I put in place. It doesn't matter what I log. If somebody puts a gun to your head and takes your computer, you're going to log in anyway. And I wouldn't want you to do any other thing. It's just the risk we have to be aware of. And that's it. Now this is all working. As the crisis in the Netherlands is pretty steep, so everybody's working from home. They're all having no problems whatsoever to log in, to work remotely or to work securely. So I can safely say our infrastructure works. But there's still some things that I would really like to want to do in the next year, or maybe the year after, depends on how long the quarantine is going on. I would very much like to be able to offer our employees a virtual machine where they log in, and the virtual machine is preloaded with all the tools they need for the job. So right now they have work laptops, and work laptops I can remote desktop into them, but there's restrictions on that a lot. So for me, the ideal world would be where they log in, and it doesn't matter if they log in via a PlayStation or via their own computer. They log in, the virtual machine boots up, and they get all the tools they need. And once they're done, the virtual machine logs down. And it doesn't matter if it becomes infected. It doesn't matter if they screw it up. I can just reboot the virtual machine. It's a bit harder to do with a laptop that's been infected with ransomware. So I know this is a long way away from where we are now, because right now all of our employees use MacBooks, iOS devices. It's not like they need it, but it's kind of like a status symbol, I think. They're all really keen on it, and they don't want to use any other type of computer than a Mac. So I'm kind of stuck on that. But I really would like to be able to emulate Mac OS in a virtual machine, and make it boot up so all the data is 100% secure. And if anything goes wrong, I could just reboot the virtual machine. So I kind of went through that quicker than I practiced. it's the end of my slide. I don't know if there are any questions. I can't really see the panel.
Yes, so just for everyone's awareness who's attending, the question and answer application or whatever is still having trouble as it was yesterday. So if you would have a question, please post in the group chat and we'll take it from there. But I guess the last point, I didn't quite catch some of the items with the Mac OS point. Was it looking for a ability to build a Mac OS VM for an end user as just as a VM for VM management, which is somewhat difficult depending upon the operating environment or whatever, just for management and security purposes, or?
Yeah. Right now, for me, it's pretty hard to use a Mac as a VM or to boot up an iOS environment in a VM for our consultants.
Okay, and so then the implications for that with the setup that you're trying to execute here is that removes then some of the control that you have in place for both the data integrity and the confidentiality issues that you're trying to address with just going things with the cloud-based mechanism in this aspect. Is that somewhat accurate, or?
Yeah, it is. It's a better summary than the way I put it. Thanks for that.
Okay. Any questions from the chat? And again, this is a really nice connection or follow-up to this. Maybe should have had these switched in the schedule a little bit, but we had a presentation yesterday on insider threat that has some additional details on some of the subjects that were discussed in this talk. So for those who missed it, I encourage looking at the recording when I finally get around to posting it, which I have not been able to yet.
Yeah, that talk was awesome, and I took notes. I mean, I used G Suite on a daily basis, but there's still a lot for me to learn there. There's so much you can learn from that data and studying patterns and stuff. That's it was amazing to hear. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if there's no questions, I guess we have a couple of minutes then. If so JD is on, he'll give our next talk on intelligence communities and collision, diverging tradecraft disputes, which looks quite interesting and very much a different topic than what we just went through, but going for diversity in a time of crisis. So thank you very much, Freek. Really appreciate the discussion and the walkthrough. I hope that was useful for a number of the people who attended.
Oh, I hope so as well. Yeah.
We have a question. Any word on the cost implication of moving all cloud?
It was actually cheaper than outsourcing our IT. And it is way cheaper than maintaining a file server on your own.
I guess one of the cost implications as well, although this seems to be the case for enterprise on-prem products as well, as moving to a monthly or annual licensing model instead of a single purchase, which is also a consideration from a budgeting standpoint, but when done properly, that shouldn't be that big of a deal.
No, it's a discussion that's worth having though, because once you buy a server, you have to maintain a server, otherwise it becomes a liability.
That's also a good point.
So if you can't maintain, then there's no point in buying.
That's very true. You're responsible for that piece of iron that's sitting there in the data center then, as opposed to it being someone else's problem.
And we all know people who love to pop servers, so.
Yes.
Is the automation easy to set up for role control compared to AD, for example? Well, yes. And I can say that wholeheartedly because I really suck as a database administrator. And my Windows skills are lacking. So that is why I choose this particular setup. It's kind of a hack because it's not meant to be used like we're using it now. The automation part is scripting mainly. It's PHP and the cron script. But I don't really know if it's easier if you're used to Active Directory. So for me, it was easier because I didn't have to start out as a noob Windows admin, because I am a noob at Windows. So for me, putting all this together was easier than learning how to do Windows well. I hope that answers your question, Andrew.
Okay. So the last rounds before we get set up for JD, anything else?
Now, I'd just like to thank you all for listening, and I'm looking forward to a couple of more days of Crisis Con.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for the content.
Cheers. You're welcome.
Yep. Okay. Let's see here. Stopping that share. JD, are you good to go for sharing slides?
Let me share out to you and see what I can do for you.
Okay.